Hello there. In this tasting, I'm going to be taking a look at a California blended wine. The wine is from the Buena Vista Winery, and it's the 2022 Sonoma County red wine, the Sherriff of Buena Vista. Now, Buena Vista is reputed to be the oldest winery in Northern California. It was founded in 1857 by somebody called Agoston Haraszthy. Now, Haraszthy was a Hungarian who'd come to the United States, to California, for the gold rush in the early 1950s. He was clearly a colourful character because in the early 50s he spent 2 years as the Sheriff of San Diego. In fact, he built the first jail there, evidently. And as a winery owner, he sort of had self-styled himself as Count Haraszthy. Now, the foundation date of the winery is 1857. Is all very well, but it's not for a couple of years, 1861, that Haraszthy goes to Europe and collects Vitis vinifera vines. So whether any wine was made prior to this trip at Buena Vista, I really don't know. But certainly his influence is one of being one of the first people to try and produce quality wine in California. There's evidence to see that he believed in planting vines close together to increase competition and so reduce yields. He advocated the idea of dropping fruit. If there was too much fruit on a vine, if there were more than about 5 bunches on a vine, he would cut the excess off and throw that on the ground so that the remaining fruit would continue to ripen more quickly. He was one of the first people to plant on hillsides, and obviously his collection of Vitis vinifera vines, in which he spent 7 months in Europe and came home with something like 100,000 cuttings. So there was obviously quite an interest in producing quality wine here. Now, for all the colourful nature of Haraszthy's personality, unfortunately his tenure as the owner of Buena Vista wasn't a particularly long one. In 1869 he died in a rather nasty accident in a Nicaraguan river that was full of alligators. So with Haraszthy's passing, the winery fell into disuse, it was abandoned, and it wasn't until 1943 that Frank and Antonia Bartholomew purchased it and set about revitalising it. Now, the most important step they took was to employ a consultant winemaker, a very well-known consultant winemaker in Napa at the time, somebody called Andrei Teleschev, to help them with this project. And there was a lot of work to do because all the vines had to be replanted and the cellars had to be rebuilt. So it wasn't until 1949 that a new wine was released from Buena Vista. So Buena Vista itself is located in what is now the Los Carneros AVA. Its location is closer to Sonoma than it is to Napa. However, currently the winery's range is large, diverse, and takes fruit from throughout California. So for instance, this wine, which is slightly in the mold of a classic California field blend, refers to itself as a Sonoma County wine. It takes fruit from the Sonoma Valley, from the Dry Creek Valley, from the Russian River, from the Moon Mountain District, and from the Alexandra Valley. So there's quite widespread fruit sourcing. The blend itself is actually predominantly Petite Sirah, which is the grape variety the Australians would call Durif. So quite a full-bodied, rich sort of style of wine in general. There's 25% of Cabernet Sauvignon goes into this. On top of that, there's a further 15% of Syrah, 6% of Grenache, and 5% of Tempranillo. Now, the fruit's hand-picked. I believe fermentation goes on in open fermenters, but I'm not sure. The different varieties are fermented separately and they age separately. So the wine spends 15 months in barrel. Those barrels are made of French oak. About 20% of those are new oak. There's not particularly strong oak influence there, but the wine ages in barrel nonetheless for 15 months. So there's probably more of a question of very slow oxidation helping to stabilise and settle the wine. So after this 15 months of barrel aging, the components are then blended and bottled. And so here we have the wine. Now, I believe that the 2022 is a relatively new release. This was purchased from the winery. Looking at the colour, it's medium to dark, fairly deep, purple ruby colour. There's quite a vivid purple note there. In fact, the colour is staining the glass. The wine's got 15% alcohol according to its label, and not only is it staining, it's producing tears there that are running slowly down the glass. The wine certainly has a decent viscosity to it. So let's have a look at the aroma, shall we? Immediately you get an impression of ripe, juicy fruit. This comes across to me as being sort of dark red to black cherry. It's that very juicy, slightly lifted in terms of tone, you know, perfumed, bright fruit. So let's have a taste. It's quite full-bodied. There's a richness, there's an intense, deep, rich, licoricey core to this wine. A very good acidity. There's a juiciness that's right to the fore. And actually, there's a certain amount of grip to the fine tannins as well. There's that sort of slightly bitter licorice core to the wine that goes on to be a little bit drying just on the finish there, where there are also sort of rich chocolatey notes. There are hints of vanilla, but there was only 20% of new oak going into this. It's not profound, it's just a delicate and well integrated note in there. So you've got plenty of this sort of dark red through to really ripe black cherry notes. In fact, almost slightly to a sort of a very ripe, almost raisined, dark prune sort of hints towards the finish. But then the acidity pulls it back and there's this freshness. Now the alcohol is quite warming, as I say, it's 15%. It doesn't feel like there's 15% of alcohol in there, to be honest. It's not finishing with an alcohol burn, or particularly with heaviness, but there is a good concentration of this sort of dark red to black fruit, and actually now I'm getting sort of quite a sweet licorice, almost a Pontefract cake sort of note towards the finish there, but still with the acidity lifting it and making it lovely and juicy. Now wines like this, with their good acidity, really you want to be drinking them just for their vibrant primary fruit. So drinking them young is not a bad idea. But given its structure, which is pretty fine, given its acidity, I would be pretty happy to leave this for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I think you'd see it develop very nicely. It's the sort of wine that will match quite a large variety of foods, given its sort of primary fruit ebullience. So barbecues, pizzas, that sort of quite straightforward food where the really expressive fruit can show itself. It's an opulent and really quite enjoyable wine. It's not a refined or subtle wine, but it's a nice drink that's providing plenty of flavour. The one thing I would say that does slightly annoy me about it is that this comes in a very heavy bottle. I mean, the presentation is great fun, this idea of and reaches back to the history of the winery, the idea that Haraszthy was the Sherriff of San Diego. But there's no need to put this in. This is an enormous punt. It's a much heavier bottle than is necessary. I think actually the wine speaks for itself. It doesn't need this over packaging to that stage. So I think that's a shame, and I'd much rather see this kind of wine coming in a lighter bottle. I don't think, to me, that would spoil the enjoyment of things whatsoever. So thank you so much for joining us. If you've enjoyed the tasting, do please press the like button. If you have any views you'd like to put across, say what you think about the bottle or anything like that, do please leave those in the comments box below. We'd love to hear what you think. We really do value your feedback. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, it would be fantastic if you'd sign up and subscribe to our channel, and then that way you can set an alert and be warned every time we publish a new video. I will leave a link to this vintage of this wine on the Wine Searcher website in the notes below, so that you can follow that and you find out where the wine's available, what its pricing is, and any other information we have about that on the website. So thank you again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to take some time and come and join us very soon for another tasting. Thanks again. Bye for now.